Welcome to the deep dive. We all kind of know the standard historical narrative of the Qibla, right?
Right. They're the early community facing Jerusalem and then shifting to Mecca.
Exactly. It's a foundational event. I mean, you learn it in the very first chapters of basically any textbook on the subject.
Yeah, it's History 101.
But if you're joining us right now, you probably aren't looking for the standard textbook narrative. You're here because you want the hidden architecture. You want to see the blueprints.
And the blueprints we are looking at today are, well, they suggest that the standard narrative isn't just slightly off.
Right.
It suggests it is actually the cover story for what might be the greatest geographical forgery in human history.
The greatest geographical forgery. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That is a massive claim.
It's staggering. To even begin to unpack it, we have to completely reset our foundational assumptions. We're talking about ancient geography, linguistics, and the very nature of spiritual ritual.
Yeah, we aren't just debating a translation of a single word here.
No, we are looking at a total re-engineering of the spiritual map.
Okay, so to do that, we really need to lay down a very clear ground rule before we take another step.
Absolutely crucial.
Every single theory, linguistic interpretation, geographical claim, all the frameworks we are unpacking today, they come exclusively from one source.
Right.
We are analyzing the extensive work of Dr. Khaled Waleed from the Almighty Covenant channel on YouTube. That's USO in Arabic. For the rest of our time today, we are stepping entirely into his specific matrix of ideas.
And we really need to emphasize this part. Because Dr. Waleed's matrix is so radically different from conventional history, it touches on some incredibly sensitive areas.
Very sensitive.
His work remaps the ancient world. It redefines deeply ingrained religious history, and he makes very specific, very critical assertions about various historical groups.
We're talking ancient Muslims, Jews, Christians, Bedouin tribes.
Exactly. So to be absolutely clear to you listening right now, we are not taking sides.
No, not at all.
We are not here to validate, verify, endorse, or even debunk these viewpoints.
Right. Our mission is purely analytical. We are impartial tour guides through Dr. Waleed's intellectual framework. We just want to break down the what and the why of his arguments so you can understand the architecture of his thesis.
Exactly. Just reporting the ideas from the source material.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's jump right into the center of the blast radius, Dr. Waleed's central thesis.
The central thesis is that the true, original Qibla, the actual epicenter of the spiritual world, is a place the Quran calls Baka.
Baka, with a B.
Right. But he argues Baka is not just another name for the modern city of Makkah in Saudi Arabia.
Which is what basically everyone is taught.
Yes, but he identifies Baka definitively as Jerusalem, specifically the area of the rock.
Okay.
And he posits that a massive coordinated deception shifted the focus of billions of people away from Jerusalem to this other place, to Makkah or Petra.
And he links that place to something totally different.
He links it to the worship of the star Sirius and the goddess Ishtar.
Okay, how does he even begin to build a case for a forgery on that kind of scale? I mean, that's huge.
He builds it by treating the Quranic text almost like a crime scene investigator treating a deposition.
I like that analogy.
When Dr. Waleed looks at the verses in Surah al-Baqarah that discuss the Qibla, he doesn't read them as a simple administrative change of direction.
It's like just an update to a map.
Right. He reads them as a real-time documentation of this geographical hijacking. And the key to his whole argument lies in how he defines a specific group of people mentioned in the text.
Okay, who are they?
The ignorant ones, or in Arabic, as-sufaha.
As-sufaha. Now, in standard translations, that usually just means the foolish or the weak-minded, doesn't it?
It does. But Dr. Waleed gives them a highly specific historical and sociological profile.
He doesn't just think they're people with low IQs.
No. In his framework, ignorance is a profound, active inversion of values. He identifies these Sufaha as ancient Bedouins and what he terms the magic of the children of Israel.
Okay, hold on. To understand his logic there, we have to look at how he defines their actions. Because according to his analysis, these are the people who orchestrated a massive trade.
Yes, the trade of the highest ideal for the lowest ideal.
Let's break those ideals down for the listener, because that sounds like a philosophical concept, but he actually grounds it in physical geography.
He does. The highest ideal in his framework is Baka, Jerusalem, the true spiritual center.
And the lowest ideal
is the false center, which he identifies geographically as Petra, or the desert region of Makkah. He calls this false center the Qibla of delusion.
The Qibla of delusion. That is a heavy phrase.
It is. And his definition of the Sufaha is rooted in this exact geography. He argues that the Bedouin tribes, who were accustomed to the desert, and certain factions of the children of Israel who wanted to obscure the true center for their own reasons, colluded.
Colluded consciously or unconsciously?
Well, whether consciously or just through shared spiritual decay, they established this delusion. They preferred the harsh, wandering nature of the desert over the established divine connection of Jerusalem.
Okay, I want to push back on that a little bit to really understand his methodology, because it's one thing to say people wandered off course spiritually, right?
Right.
But to say they physically relocated the center of a faith to an ancient Abatian city like Petra, what physical or architectural evidence does he claim the text actually points to? Because he doesn't just rely on abstract philosophy here.
No, he doesn't. And this is where his synthesis of scripture and archaeology becomes highly detailed. He argues that the text contains specific architectural markers that identify this Qibla of delusion.
Give me an example.
He points to the concept of the Mosque of Harm, Masjid Diyar.
Okay, now traditional history places the Mosque of Harm in Medina. It was built by hypocrites to divide the early Muslims.
Exactly. But Dr. Waleed from the Almighty Covenant channel recontextualizes it entirely. He argues that the very first Mosque of Harm was actually the structural foundation of this false desert Qibla.
Wow.
It wasn't just a rogue building in Medina. It was the epicenter of the geographical forgery itself.
And he doesn't stop there. He connects this to other physical remnants in the desert. He talks about a dried-up well. He calls it the Well of Wandering.
Yes.
And most intriguingly, he points to a deserted, carved palace known as the Palace of the Daughter.
Now, if you know anything about the archaeology of Petra, there is literally a famous monumental structure there called Qaz Bint.
The Palace of the Daughter.
Exactly, the Palace of the Daughter. And this is not a coincidence in Dr. Waleed's matrix. He explicitly links this palace to the worship of Ishtar, or Venus, and the star Sirius.
Which is Arshira in Arabic.
Right. So he paints a picture of a civilization that had abandoned the singular divine connection of the rock in Jerusalem for a localized desert-based paganism centered around celestial bodies and carved stone.
So he's essentially dusting off ancient ruins and saying, look, the text is describing exactly what we see in the archaeology of the desert.
He's looking at the dry well and the carved stones not as marvels of ancient engineering,
but as monuments to spiritual deviation.
Exactly. The Palace of the Daughter isn't just a building in his view. It's the physical embodiment of the lowest ideal, a place where divine light was actively blocked out by idolatry.
And that is the crux of the Qibla of delusion. It is a place characterized by wandering, both literally in the desert and spiritually.
He ties physical ruin directly to spiritual ruin. He argues that humanity became so accustomed to the physical habits of their ancestors, so comforted by the tangible carved idols and the rituals in the desert, that they completely lost the original coordinates of the truth.
The scale of this theory is just staggering to think about for a second. Imagine waking up tomorrow and someone presenting a highly intricate linguistic and archaeological case that a world-famous monument, say the Vatican or the Kaaba, was secretly conceptually relocated centuries ago.
And that the original true location is hundreds of miles away.
Right. It forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question. How easily can human history be misremembered?
It's profound vulnerability. Dr. Waleed's thesis relies heavily on the idea that geographical idols, physical places that we imbue with false holiness, can entirely replace true spiritual centers over time.
When tradition becomes blind habit, an entire civilization can be steered off course.
The memory of the true Makkah was overwritten by the physical reality of the desert Makkah.
Okay, so if the map was corrupted and humanity was facing the wrong way, caught in the gravity of this Qibla of delusion, how did the course correction happen?
How did they find the way back?
Right. How did the Prophet Muhammad find the original coordinates? This brings us to a really fascinating reinterpretation of a famous Quranic verse. The text talks about the Prophet turning his face to the sky. Now, conventionally, we picture this very literally. The Prophet is physically looking up at the clouds, waiting for an angel to descend with instructions on which way to face.
Right, the traditional image is very physical, very localized. But Dr. Waleed strips away that literal physical interpretation entirely.
He argues that turning his face to the sky does not mean craning his neck to look at the atmosphere.
No. In Dr. Waleed's vocabulary, the prophet was turning his consciousness. He was engaging in a profound cognitive search through the horizons of science, revelation, and what the author calls the cognitive sky.
The cognitive sky. And to explain this cognitive search, Dr. Waleed uses a set of metaphors that are so modern they almost feel like they belong in a physics textbook rather than a theological commentary.
They do. He frames this ancient spiritual quest using the language of electricity, circuits, and frequencies.
It's a brilliant pedagogical tool for his thesis.
It really is. He takes abstract spiritual concepts and grounds them in the mechanics of energy transmission. According to his reading, the prophet's search in the sky was a search for a lost frequency.
A lost frequency.
Right.
So it's as if the true Qibla, the rock in Jerusalem, is constantly broadcasting on a highly specific divine cosmic bandwidth.
And humanity had simply lost the tuning. The dial had been bumped, and everyone was getting static.
I love that analogy. It shifts prayer from being a geographical chore, like make sure you stand facing this exact compass degree, to a technological necessity for the human soul.
Exactly. So when the revelation finally comes and the Qibla is officially shifted back to Baka, Dr. Waleed describes this not as a new direction, but as a reconnection.
A reconnection to the original electrical mains source, the capital M mains, the ultimate power grid of the divine.
The rock in Jerusalem is the central node of the grid in his framework.
But this raises a massive logical question that Dr. Waleed has to answer. If Jerusalem was always the true mains, why did the prophet and the early believers pray toward the wrong Qibla Petra or the desert in the first place?
Right. If it was a delusion, why participate in it even briefly?
Because the traditional narrative is that they prayed towards Jerusalem first and then shifted to Mecca. But Dr. Waleed's matrix flips the timeline, doesn't it?
He fundamentally reorders it based on his linguistic analysis. He argues that the early community initially prayed toward the desert Qibla out of inherited habit, born from their corrupted environment.
Okay.
But God allowed this to happen for a very specific mechanical reason, to cleanse the connections.
Cleansing the connections. Okay, explain that, because it sounds like you're talking about stripping the rust off a wire before you plug it into a high-voltage socket.
That is precisely the metaphor he's going for.
Yeah.
You cannot take a corrupted, heavily oxidized wire and plug it directly into the ultimate power source.
It will short-circuit.
Exactly. It'll short-circuit. The period of facing the Qibla of delusion was a diagnostic phase. It was a test to expose the Sufaha, the ignorant ones.
Ones who are perfectly happy to blindly follow geographical idols.
Right. But for the true seekers, it was a time of internal purification, a process of stripping away the false holiness of the desert. Once the spiritual rust was removed, the ultimate spiritual circuit could finally be completed.
And that completed circuit connects directly to the rock in Jerusalem, which he identifies as the true Al-Masar al-Haram,
The sacred monument.
and the true station of Abraham. It makes the act of prayer sound like a precise science of alignment.
It does.
If you aren't dialed into the mains, your battery is just slowly draining while you bow to a stone in the desert.
The philosophical implication here is massive. Dr. Waleed, from the Almighty Covenant channel, is arguing that true worship is not arbitrary. It's not about geographical tradition where you face a direction just because your ancestors did.
Right.
It is a conscious scientific effort to align your internal spectral frequency with the objective truth of the universe. If you are even a fraction of a degree off axis, you are disconnected from the power source.
But here's where the plot really thickens. According to the author's analysis, there is a group of people on Earth who are absolutely, unequivocally aware of where that power source is.
Yes.
They know the exact coordinates of the mains, but they actively try to obscure it.
This takes us into a deeply observational part of Dr. Waleed's thesis. He looks at the role of the people of the book, which in his specific textual framework refers primarily to the children of Israel.
Okay.
He claims that their religious scholars and monks know perfectly well from their hidden texts and ancient lineage that Baka is Jerusalem and that the rock is the true center of the divine grid.
But he doesn't just rely on ancient texts to prove they know this. He points to their modern physical behavior at the site today, right? This is the part that I found really fascinating. How he reads physical body language as a theological confession.
Yes, he calls it a compulsive physical confession. Dr. Waleed observes the physical actions of the children of Israel at the rock in Jerusalem. The bowing, the prostrating, and most crucially, the practice of backing away from the site without ever turning their backs to it.
Right. If you've ever seen footage of the Western Wall or the Temple Mount area, you see this practice. People pray, and then they slowly walk backward, keeping their face toward the stones. Traditionally, that is explained as a sign of ultimate respect. You don't show your back to the presence of God.
But Dr. Waleed interprets it through his mechanical framework. For him, this isn't just a cultural sign of respect. It is involuntary evidence that their bodies recognize the immense energetic pull of the center.
Like magnets.
Exactly. It's as if they are physically tethered to the mains. Even if their outward theology tries to mask the universal truth of the prophet's message, their physical bodies cannot lie. They cannot physically turn their backs on the ultimate power source.
Okay, so if they know it is the true Qibla, and their bodies recognize it as the mains, why do they reject the prophet's call to it? If everyone agrees on the location, what is the actual conflict?
The conflict is about methodology and access. Dr. Waleed introduces this concept of the Qibla of the ego.
The Qibla is the ego.
He asserts that the children of Israel refuse to follow the prophet's Qibla because the prophet's method is inherently universal. The Quranic phrase used to describe the prophet's message is Hudan lil alamin, a guidance for all worlds, for all of humanity.
And universality is the ultimate threat to a monopoly.
Precisely. According to the text, they want to hoard the blessing of the rock for themselves. They treat the divine connection as an exclusionary asset based on racial or ethnic lineage.
They want the immense power of the mains, but they refuse to share the grid with the rest of the world.
So they maintain their physical proximity to the true center, but they alter the methodology. They practice the Qibla of the ego.
And the result of that ego is a total fragmentation of spiritual energy at the very site that is supposed to unite humanity. Dr. Waleed paints this incredibly vivid, almost tragic picture of Jerusalem.
He really does.
You have the greatest power source on earth, the central node of reality, and it is completely shattered by competing agendas.
He breaks it down geometrically. He notes that within Jerusalem, the Jews face the temple, which he actually calls an Israeli imitation or a fake replica of the true, uncarved ideal.
Wow.
The Christians face the east, orienting toward the physical altar or the rising sun. And the Muslims, having been deceived by the Sufaha, the ignorant ones, were tricked into facing the desert of Petra or Makkah entirely.
So it's like a shattered lens. Everyone is gathered near the geographical center, but they're all methodologically scattered, pointing their internal compasses at slight deviations.
And Dr. Waleed points out that following these deviations, what the text calls awa, or vain desires, plunges a person entirely into the realm of the wrongdoers.
It doesn't matter if your desire is the geographic myth of a desert Bedouin or the exclusionary myth of a scholar hoarding the truth. Both sever your connection to the mains.
It is a profound picture of spiritual dysfunction. And I think this is a really good moment for an impartiality check to remind ourselves of the framework we are in.
Absolutely. Because as we are unpacking these intense historical archetypes, the ignorant Bedouin wandering in the desert, the arrogant scholar hoarding the truth in Jerusalem, it is crucial to remember that we are doing a structural analysis of Dr. Khaled Waleed's worldview.
From the Almighty Covenant channel.
Yes. We are not endorsing his historical categorizations of Jewish, Christian, or Islamic practices. We are showing you how he uses these groups as archetypes to teach a broader lesson about the human condition.
Right. In his matrix, these groups represent the fundamental ways humanity fails to align with objective truth. You can fail through ignorance, by accepting a fake reality because it's comfortable and familiar.
Or you can fail through arrogance.
By knowing the truth, but trying to restrict access to it for your own ego. The ultimate goal, the true Qibla of the prophet, is the synthesis, knowing the objective truth and operating it as an open source guidance for all worlds.
So if the lens is shattered, if the energy of the world is entirely fragmented and the compass is pointing the wrong way, how does a text from the 7th century propose we fix it?
How do you course correct?
Right. How does the universe course correct a geographical forgery of this magnitude? Because Dr. Waleed points to a very specific Quranic word as the mechanism for this repair, the concept of jalal.
Yes, jal. In traditional translation, this word usually just means to make, to set, or to appoint. But Dr. Waleed executes a fascinating linguistic pivot here.
He reinterprets jal as a divine scale. A zero-sum cosmic balancing act?
Zero-sum scale. Okay, explain the physics of that in his theological framework.
He argues that the scale of Ja'al dictates that the two sides, truth and falsehood, cannot be equal, and they cannot rise together.
Right.
For the truth to be elevated meaning, for Baka and Jerusalem to be recognized again as the true center of the world, the falsehood must be actively lowered.
It's spiritual gravity.
Exactly. You cannot just promote Jerusalem. You must simultaneously demote Makkah and Petra. You have to actively strip the false Qibla of its artificial holiness to break the illusion.
It's not enough to just find the truth. You have to dismantle the machinery of the lie.
Right.
And as this cosmic scale tips, Dr. Waleed goes into the text and completely redefines the most fundamental, universally recognized rituals of the faith.
Let's look at the Hajj, the pilgrimage. In his analysis, he looks at the word akab.
Traditionally, this relates to the Kaaba, the physical cube, and the physical act of traveling there. But he pulls the rug out from under that physical definition entirely.
He does. He redefines akab as a spectral frequency.
A spectral frequency.
Yes. In his framework, while physical travel to the center of the earth, which he views as Jerusalem, might be an element, the true essence of akab is a continuous connection of consciousness.
It is the act of constantly, relentlessly tuning your internal dial to the fixed face of God, which is represented by the rock.
It's like maintaining a constant ping to a server. If you are on a network, your computer is constantly sending out tiny packets of data just to say, I'm still here, I'm still connected. Dr. Waleed is saying that akab is the spiritual version of that ping.
That is a brilliant modern analogy for it. Because what happens if you stop pinging the server? You time out, you get disconnected.
In Dr. Waleed's terms, if you lose that spectral frequency, you fall victim to satanic forgetfulness.
You forget your origins, you forget the coordinates of truth, and you slowly start accepting the fake, projected reality of the desert Qibla.
Aka is the active, daily, cognitive resistance against that spiritual amnesia.
Now I want to pivot to the part of Dr. Waleed's thesis that requires probably the biggest conceptual leap. Because we do not usually associate ancient spiritual rituals with modern macroeconomic theory.
No, we do not.
But he takes terms related to ancient animal sacrifice and turns them into a blueprint for a global economic system.
This is undoubtedly the most radical extrapolation in his entire body of work. He takes two very specific terms associated with the traditional pilgrimage, hadi and khalid.
Okay, let's establish the baseline first. Traditionally, what do those words mean in the context of a 7th century desert pilgrimage?
Traditionally, hadi refers to the sacrificial animals, the sheep, goats, or camels that pilgrims bring to the Kaaba to be sacrificed and distributed to the poor.
And khalid.
Khaled refers to the collars or garlands placed around the necks of those specific animals to mark them as sacred and untouchable. If an animal has a garland on it, you know it belongs to the divine and no one can steal it or use it for personal gain.
Right. It's a very literal, physical, agricultural practice.
Yeah.
So how does Dr. Waleed from the Almighty Covenant Channel justify making the massive leap from a garlanded camel to modern macroeconomics using 7th century Arabic?
He does it by extracting the core conceptual utility of the words rather than their literal physical manifestation. Let's start with hagi.
Okay.
At its root, it is a fluid asset that is given away for the public good. Dr. Waleed translates this concept directly into modern economic terms as liquid assets or flowing capital.
So cash, essentially, fluid wealth.
Yes. He argues that this fluid wealth, the hadi, is meant to flow continuously into the public treasury, the house of wealth, to serve the world and ensure equity.
It's the lifeblood of a functioning society. If blood stops flowing, the body dies. If capital stops flowing and pools in the hands of a few, society dies.
Okay, I track the logic there. Sacrifice equals giving up fluid wealth for the public good. But what about khalid, the garlands? How does a marker on an animal become an economic asset?
Think about what the garland actually represents. It is a marker of untouchable dedication. It signifies that this entity is ring-fenced for a higher purpose and cannot be monopolized by an individual.
Right.
Dr. Waleed takes that concept of an untouchable dedication and applies it to fixed assets, real estate, massive tracts of land, factories, public infrastructure, energy grids.
So infrastructure is the modern garlanded asset.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed argues that these fixed assets function as a divine trust, a sacred garland around the neck of society itself. Because they are a divine trust, they cannot be hoarded, they cannot be privatized by monopolies, and they cannot be locked away by a select few billionaires or corporations.
They must exist for permanent public benefit, functioning as the stable bedrock upon which the fluid capital, the hadi, can flow.
That is incredibly intricate. He is tying spiritual alignment directly to socioeconomic justice. He is saying that theology and economics are not two separate domains. They are exactly the same circuit.
He is arguing that if your spiritual compass is broken, if you are facing the wrong Qibla, wandering in the Qibla of delusion, your entire economic system inevitably breaks down. It devolves into the hoarding mentality of the Qibla of the ego.
People who hoard spiritual blessings will inevitably hoard physical wealth. They will privatize the khalid, and dam up the HAL 80.
But if you fix the Qibla, if you manage to align your spectral frequency with the true center, the mains in Jerusalem, you fix the societal machine. The flow of liquid assets and the public trust of fixed assets fall perfectly into balance on the divine scale of Jal.
That is the ultimate architecture of his argument. The geography of the ancient world, the coordinates of the Qibla, are just a macrocosm for the internal geography of the human soul and the external structure of human society.
You are either tuning into the frequency of universal truth and flowing your resources for the benefit of all worlds, or you are wandering in the desert of your own ego, hoarding resources that were meant to be shared.
This has been an incredibly dense, genuinely paradigm-shifting journey. Let's take a moment to look back at the map we just navigated.
Good idea.
We have explored the intricate, highly alternative theories of Dr. Khaled Waleed from the Almighty Covenant channel on YouTube. We unpacked his central, explosive thesis that the true Qibla is Bakka, which is the rock in Jerusalem, and that the traditional narrative of Makkah and Petra represents a massive historical deception.
The Qibla of delusion, orchestrated by the Sufaha, the ignorant ones who traded the highest ideal for the lowest.
We also examined his profound use of modern technological metaphors. We looked at how he reads the prophet's search for the Qibla as a cognitive search for a lost cosmic frequency, and how he views the rock in Jerusalem as the ultimate electrical mains of the divine grid.
We explored his sharp critique of those who succumb to the Qibla of the ego, recognizing the power source but trying to hoard its blessings through exclusionary monopolies, rather than sharing it as guidance for all worlds.
And finally, we looked at how he re-engineers the text through the divine scale of Jal. To elevate the truth of Bakka, the falsehood of the desert must be lowered. And as that scale tips, rituals like the Hajj transform from physical travel into maintaining a spectral frequency connection.
And ancient concepts like sacrificial animals and garlands, Hadi and Khalid, are reborn as a radical blueprint for a just, equitable, global economic system built on flowing liquid capital and public trust fixed assets. It is a complete, top-to-bottom reimagining of both history and human purpose.
And as we prepare to close out this deep dive, I want to offer one final calm reminder of the parameters of our discussion today. Our purpose was purely analytical. We set out to explore the specific, highly intricate worldview constructed by Dr. Waleed from the Almighty Covenant channel.
We did this to allow you to witness firsthand just how deeply ancient texts can be reinterpreted when you change the foundational assumptions, and how a shift in geographical understanding can radically alter the theology, history, and economics of a belief system.
We are not endorsing the historical validity of the forgery, the geographical claims, or the archaeological reassignments. We are merely mapping the fascinating intellectual terrain he has laid out.
We mapped it, and now we leave it to you to test the structural integrity of that map for yourself. But before we go, there was a detail in the source material, something we barely touched on, but it is too profound to ignore.
Dr. Waleed briefly alluded to a concept regarding the Bir al-Arwa, the Well of Souls,
which is a cavern located directly beneath the foundation stone, the rock in Jerusalem. In traditional lore, it's just a place where the spirits of the dead can be heard waiting for judgment.
But in Dr. Waleed's framework, he suggests this place acts as a massive spiritual repository, a literal nexus point for human consciousness.
It is a staggering concept to leave you with. If we follow Dr. Waleed's logic to its absolute ultimate conclusion, if human consciousness is genuinely mechanically tied to these geographical frequencies, and if the rock is indeed the central mains of the earth, what is the physical mechanism of that connection?
What actually happens to the global human psyche when millions, perhaps billions of people simultaneously tune their spectral frequencies to that exact ancient coordinate?
Think about the voltage of that. Is it just a quiet internal ritual? Or if this theory holds any literal weight, is it a mechanism for a collective human awakening?
Or are we talking about a massive global circuit completion? A surge of universal energy designed to reset the human operating system?
That we have simply forgotten how to plug into. Keep your dial tuned, keep searching for the frequency, and we will see you on the next deep dive.